After covering the war contributing countries of the African continent in the first part of our last video, we moved on to a few countries in the Middle East. In this next video, we're first going to tick off a few more countries in the Middle East, pay a visit to Japan and Korea, and then take to the air and provide you with an overview of Central and Western Europe, as well as the UK and Greenland. The Jews and Arabs in British Mandatory Palestine were competing against each other and British authorities before the war. Among the Arabs, there was no uniform allegiance to either the Allies or Axis, and the leader of the Jews in Palestine inspired many to cease fighting the Brits and see the greater threat. Building the Palestine Regiment, the British tried to recruit equal Jews and Arabs, but only one Arab volunteered for every 3 Jews. This regiment guarded North Africa and Egypt, though in 1944, the Brits let 3 Jewish battalions become the Jewish Brigade and go fight against the Axis in Italy. The brigade helped many Jews escape Europe for Palestine. Lebanon criticized the Vichy French government, which ruled the country at the start of the war and which also let Nazi aircraft and other supplies into Iraq through Syria to be used against the British. In turn, the Brits marched into Syria and Lebanon and subdued the Vichy government, setting Lebanon on its way to independence. Lebanon later declared war on Germany and Japan. In 1941, and with aid from the Germans and Italians, the Nazi-sympathizing Iraqi politician Rashid Ali overthrew the pro-British government, and so, to maintain control of crucial routes and oil supplies, the British responded by invading Iraq. Once they'd sent Rashid Ali literally flying out of the country, the Brits prodded Iraq to declare war on the Axis. Another country controlled by the Vichy government after the fall of France, Syria was invaded by the British, who, motivated once again by that sweet oil, beat the Vichy government into surrender with the help of the Free French, and like Lebanon, started Syria on its path to independence. Imperial Japan was keen to expand its power in the Far East and entered the war by attacking the US naval base in Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941. Japan's strategy was to seize as much of the Far East territories from the Allies and local countries as quickly as possible to form a buffer zone against the American counteroffensive, which they knew would be fierce. This expansion went well until mid-1942, when decisive defeats to the Japanese Navy in the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway turned the tide. The Japanese developed a reputation as the most brutal combatants of the war, committing all number of atrocious war crimes, and when they refused to surrender after everyone else had at the end of the war, 2 atomic bombs quickly changed their attitude. With their country under Japanese rule, over 100,000 Koreans were forced to join the Imperial Army. Dressing themselves for independence back in 1919, the Koreans had formed a government, and in 1940, an army was born under that same persisting government. In 1941, this army, the aptly named Korean Liberation Army, declared war on Japan. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Japan's surrender, Korea was occupied by both the Yanks and the Soviets, and disagreements between them inside of the country eventually led to the Korean War. While the Germans took Denmark as a stepping stone into their attack on Norway, they didn't actually occupy Greenland. After Greenland's sheriffs invoked an emergency clause and declared their territory self-ruling, they requested the aid and the protection of the US. The Yanks set up traffic facilities, ratio beacons, radio stations, weather stations, ports, and other infrastructure in Greenland. And when they declared war, Greenland followed them. Throughout the war, Greenland exported cryolite to the US, Canada, and Portugal. After Greece rejected Italian requests to use strategic positions, the latter attacked in October 1940. The Greeks fought so well that the Italians needed the help of the Germans 6 months later. With elite Axis reinforcements, however, the tough little country was taken over eventually, and was installed with a puppet government that was resisted by the populace until most of the Germans pulled out in 1945. In 1940, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Armenians, Maronites, and Latins banded together to make the Cyprus Regiment, a unit under the British Army some 30,000 strong. They trod into the Western Front alongside mules, using the beasts to shoulder equipment and supplies to places no vehicle dared to travel. The regiment went on to serve the Allies in the Greek campaign, in North Africa, in France, the Middle East, and in Italy. Bulgarian alignment jumped around a little. At first, Bulgaria was neutral, but after Italy failed to invade Greece, the Nazis sort of forced Bulgaria to join them and let them pass through to reinforce the Italians in Greece. With the arrival of the Soviets following the 9th of September coup d'etat, the Nazi-led Bulgarian government was overthrown and the country declared war on Germany, attacking them in Yugoslavia and continuing through Hungary and Austria. The Axis swept in and occupied Yugoslavia in 1941, creating puppet and client states out of Nedića's Serbia, the Kingdom of Montenegro, and the independent state of Croatia, which we'll get to next. Resistance stirred and two distinct parties formed: the Chetniks, who were recognized as the official Yugoslav movement by the Allies, and the Partisans, who were communist-backed. In essence, the Balkans was pretty much a free-for-all in World War II, and there are many controversies that surround the different groups to this day. The independent state of Croatia joined the Axis and signed the Tripartite Pact in 1941, and during the war, not only fought alongside the Axis, but also attempted genocide against the Serbians. The Jasenovac death camp, an extermination camp they set up in Slovenia, was also referred to as the Auschwitz of the Balkans. 100,000 Italians settled in Albania after Italy invaded in 1939. The Albanian population began in support of their fascist political parties, though after Operation Barbarossa and Albania's declaration of war on the Soviets, communist resistance groups rose up in Albania, aiming to reclaim their occupied territory. A year after these groups banded together to form a National Liberation Army in 1942, the Nazis rained paratroopers on them, preventing their seizure of the capital, Tirana, and sending them south. After regathering and reclaiming the bulk of southern Albania in 1944, and after most of the Germans had left Tirana, the Albanian communists took it back. With internal political upheaval after surrendering territory to the Soviets, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania sided with the Axis, feeding more than 600,000 men to the German suicide machine in the Soviet winter and in Stalingrad. Romania, on top of a great many men, also supplied oil to the Germans. When Germany and Hungary declared war on Romania, Romania joined the Allies, delivering almost 600,000 men again to war, but this time against the Axis. Before the war, the Soviets were in control of Moldova. During it, they took the rest from Romania. The attack of the Nazis, and later the Soviets, on Poland made World War II official. Of the Poles with military experience that escaped Poland, many fought for the Allies in the Battle of France, and others ended up joining the British in the Battle of Britain, earning huge amounts of respect for their piloting skills. Poland itself, however, suffered horrendous civilian casualties in the war, with a mix of both Nazi and Soviet hatred toward them, culminating in the deaths of over 6 million Polish citizens. Although it's not a country, I wanted to mention it anyway. A symbol of bitterness and defeat in World War I, the free city of Danzig, which had been stripped from Germany at the end of the Great War, was one of the key motivators for Germany to invade Poland with such vigor. Unfortunately for the Czechoslovaks, who were ready to defend their country, their president in 1939, Emil Hácha, was an old and quiet man who just didn't want a group of Germans yelling threats at him anymore, and gave up his country to the Nazis after 3 hours of political deliberation. Of the Czechs who escaped the country, many fought in the Free Allied armies and were important to many battles, the most notable being the Battle of Britain. Following their Great Depression, and with similar political ideals and foreign policy to the Nazis, it's no wonder Hungary signed the Tripartite Pact in 1940. After it was caught negotiating a secret armistice with the US and UK, the Nazis occupied Hungary. Threatened by the Soviets, Hungary also signed an armistice with them, but the Germans forced them to revoke it, and eventually the Soviets swept over and defeated Hungary and the Germans therein. More than 300,000 Hungarian soldiers and twice that many civilians perished in the war. Liechtenstein kept out of the fighting and hung out with Switzerland, forfeiting the House of Liechtenstein's land holdings in Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia. Liechtenstein accepted around 400 Jewish refugees from Europe and made some of the wealthier among them citizens. The Vatican City's army saw no combat, and the tiny country remained unoccupied. The Vatican organized extensive humanitarian aid throughout the conflict, was used as a smuggling route for the Vichy French and Axis-aligned Spanish personnel, was technically still at war with Germany until 1958, where they finally remembered to declare peace. Luxembourg was neutral when France was invaded, though the Nazis marched in and took it anyway. Switzerland was neutral, though it ended up at least preparing for war after the Nazis took Poland. Hitler did think about invading Switzerland, but decided against it because Switzerland's military would have such an advantage on their home ground and in their mountains, and it would end up costing him too much. While neutral, the Swiss did blow several German aircraft out of the sky and detain and supposedly abuse Allied aircrews who landed in Swiss airports. The Nazis blitzkrieged neutral Belgium when they blitzkrieged France, and after resisting the Nazis in the Battle of Belgium, the country surrendered. In Nazi-occupied Belgium, over 25,000 Jews and Romani were extinguished in death camps, and the Belgian resistance, which is distinct from the Free Belgian forces, toiled to sabotage the Nazis and protect the Jews. Belgian forces fought for the Allies outside of Belgium too, and the country was liberated by the Allies and the Free Belgian forces toward the end of 1944. Also neutral and also invaded by the Nazis, the Dutch of the Netherlands fought alongside the Allies all over the world, including in East Asia, in battles in the Pacific, and the Battle of Britain. In 1942, Japan invaded the Dutch East Indies, holding it until they surrendered in 1945, all while subjecting the native Indonesians to the hardships of war. The UK, including England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and all of Britain's dominions and colonies, declared war on the Nazis after they invaded Poland, and with Japan in 1941. A heavyweight not only on the battlefield, Britain was also one of the primary contributors when it came to intelligence and counterintelligence operations, with examples including the formations of the Special Operations Executive and Alan Turing eventually breaking the Enigma code. Ireland was the only state in the British Commonwealth to stay neutral, though its citizens were free to join foreign forces, with more than 50,000 of them going to fight alongside the Brits. There were also many Irish soldiers who defected to help in the fight, and upon return were treated with absolute contempt by their government. The British Overseas Territory and Fortress of Gibraltar was used by the Brits as an anchor and shield for the British Navy in Europe. From Gibraltar, the Brits launched themselves into the Atlantic and Mediterranean theatres. Austria was part of Nazi Germany even before the invasion of Poland, with more than 1.2 million Austrians serving in the German forces throughout the war, and it is of course the home of you-know-who. After a humiliating loss and peace terms imposed after the First World War, economic destitution set the scene for the Nazi rise to power in 1933. Hitler beefed up the German military and wanted to expand his territory in surrounding states, and this led to a showdown with the Allies and war in 1939. After initial great success, the formidable German war machine stretched itself too thin with major operations against Britain, Russia, and in North Africa. The tide eventually turned, especially when America joined the Allies in late 1941, and the war ended in 1945, and Germany was split between the Western and Soviet spheres of influence. Italy was on a conquest before the war started and joined on the side of the Axis after seeing the early success of the Nazis, intending to take its share of Allied territory. Italy focused its military efforts on the British in Africa and the Middle East, though it also set up regimes in Spain and Croatia following the invasion of Yugoslavia and invaded much of Greece. Contested by resistance forces and the Allies on every front and running out of juice, the Italian Empire imploded. After Mussolini's arrest in 1943, Italy surrendered and its annexed territories were snatched up by the Nazis. A vital air and sea base for the Brits in Africa, the British colony island of Malta was pretty much pummeled into the Mediterranean. It was, in fact, awarded the medal for the most bombed place in all of the war, and for surviving that and not crumbling under the pressure, the whole country received the George's Cross. The tiny Principality of Monaco was sympathetic to the French before and during the invasion of France, but the Prince of Monaco, Louis II, tried to keep the country neutral. However, the Italians occupied it from November 1942 until September of the following year, when the Germans seized it after the fall of Mussolini's regime. Eventually losing the war, however, Germany naturally withdrew from Monaco in September of 1944. When France signed the 22nd of June armistice in the Battle of France, the country was sundered into two zones, the German-occupied zone in the north and the unoccupied zone in the south. A puppet government was established in the city of Vichy in southern France, and while this Vichy-controlled zone was officially neutral, it did collaborate with the Nazis. Led by the exiled French government, the Free French forces supported the Allies in the war, while the French resistance toiled in occupied France. The liberation of France began on D-Day, the 6th of June 1944, with Operation Overlord and Dragoon. Francisco Franco rose to dictatorship in Spain during the bloody Spanish Civil War of the 30s, and he was supported with men and resources by his fellow fascists Mussolini and Hitler. He considered joining the Axis effort at several points in time, but he decided against it since the Civil War left the country in economic and military turmoil. He helped the Axis in small ways, but the war never came to Spain. Portugal was under the arch-conservative autocratic rule of António de Oliveira Salazar throughout the war, and in 1939 announced its neutrality. Portugal managed to remain neutral despite pressures placed upon it both by the British and the Germans over the islands of Azores and their tungsten exports. Over 100,000 Jews fled Europe via Lisbon, Portugal's capital city. We've covered some of the largest pro-Allied countries and all of the countries which signed the Tripartite Pact in this video, and it goes without saying that Europe was the main stage of the Second World War. With that said, we've only really skimmed the surface here, so you can look forward to subsequent videos going into much more detail on some or even all of these countries. Now, if there's a sizable amount of countries that I've missed, and I know I've missed a couple, let me know in the comments section below and I could potentially do a final part 5. But that's only if this video reaches 5,000 likes. So if you do enjoy it, make sure you do hit that like button and that big subscribe button as well. Anyways guys, just before you go, make sure you check out all those links in the description below, including our new clothing shop where you can buy all manner of clothes and accessories related to World War II. We're going to constantly be updating what's on that site guys, so make sure you check it out for cool World War II related t-shirt designs, as well as World War II related art and all that fun stuff. We do also have the Discord if you want to interact with other history buffs such as yourself, and the Patreon if you want to help support the channel more than you already are by watching this video. So those links are all in the description below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching and I hope you learned something new.